The main thing they're worried about is us, the great British public, Will and me and everybody listening, say, where's all this money coming from? And basically it comes from us. Yeah. And therefore they've got to change this business of the two big duchies, which are their main source of income, which they don't acknowledge is public money.
Andrew is no longer a prince and has been banished to the Sandringham estate, where he'll live at the king's expense. So, has the king done enough to mean the royal family can move on from the scandals that have long surrounded the king's brother? Well, with us now, the historian A.N. Wilson. Good morning.
Hi, Callum.
It's lovely to see you. And also Deputy Editor at the New Statesman, Will Lloyd. Hello, Will.
Hello, Callum. Hi. And hello, Mr. Wilson.
Hello there.
It's great to have you both with us. Will has been writing this week about why now could be, and in fact should be, the time to abolish the monarchy. We will bring that factor in and that discussion in just a sec. But let's start with the history, I suppose, Andrew, of what we're talking about here and how unprecedented this moment actually is.
Well, I mean, nothing like this has ever happened before. That's absolutely true. And it will bring with it all sorts of implications, which I'm sure we're going to hear about how we fund the royal family, basically. And it really all goes back. I've written a lot in my life about Queen Victoria. It really all goes back to her, because at the beginning of her reign, these two huge duchies, Duchy of Lancaster, Duchy of Cornwall, which were really public money, she insisted that she should keep as personal property. And the Chancellor of the Exchequer and the Prime Minister at the time said, no, you can't, it's public money. But she did. And with that money, she built Balmoral, Sandringham, Osborne House. And they put all the money, they continue to put all the money into their pockets. And that really is the origin of all this problem, because the royal family, like most families, have got their black sheep, and the black sheep have been pretty black in history. Prince Andrew is not alone in all this, though he is pretty ghastly, of course he is. And if they were behaving abominably in private, without drawing money from the public sector, from the public purse, this row wouldn't be so dangerous politically. And that's really the trouble, that it's not just that Andrew was involved with Jeffrey Epstein, Harvey Weinstein. Just look at the guest list for his 18-year-old girl's birthday party. I mean, it's absolutely appalling. But it isn't just that. It's the fact that he's been living a life of extreme extravagance, and so is his ex-wife. You're paying, the listeners to this programme, the taxpayers of this country are paying for people who live in Crown Estate properties unless they pay a decent rent.
Yeah, so everyone's got a stake in it. And
Everybody's got a stake. And also the other thing to bear in mind, before we get on to our Republican talk, is that most people in this country want to have a monarchy. And therefore you've got to, given that democratic fact, I think you've got to do all you can politically, whether you want the monarchy or not, to recognise that most people want it. And in order to keep it as a plausible political alternative to republicanism, you've got to make it plausible. And at the moment it is slightly implausible because of this money thing.
Well, let's get Will Lloyd in on that, because, Will, you've been making the case just this week that now is the time to abolish the royal family.
I've been making the case that we don't really understand the House of Windsor. The public doesn't understand it very well. And if the public did understand the House of Windsor, and they did understand the detail of what the protection and the obstacles thrown up to defend Prince Andrew, they'd be very angry. And I think if they realised that the monarch was not a ceremonial or symbolic monarch, the monarch is a political player with their own interests, which they pursue, then we might start to see the apathy and indifference that currently exists among the public towards the House of Windsor turn into something more like anger and disgust. And then possibly you would have a republic. Although I don't really like the word republic, and I don't really like contemporary republicanism.
Well, I mean, a political system that doesn't have a monarch is a republic, whether you like the word or not.
We might have. We don't know. We may have another. Why not have the Stuarts back? Where are they? Where's the Duke of Bavaria? I simply think.
Well, we all know the answers to these questions. Of course, we do. I'm half on your side about wanting to get rid of the monarchy, but the half of me that isn't is partly guided by what I said earlier, that most people want to keep the monarchy, and why do they want to keep it? I'm amazed you should say people are indifferent to the House of Windsor. We've just spent hours on this programme. Every newspaper in the land, everybody, every family in the land over their breakfast are talking about this strange family. So I don't think we are indifferent to them. And one of the reasons we aren't is if you look back over the history of the 20th century, which were the countries which didn't go down the path of having dictatorships and tyrannies, whether communist or fascist, looking after them, and they were the constitutional monarchies. And I'm very guided by that. And it was partly George V and his successive governments that stopped this country either becoming fascist or communist. And that's a fact. That's a historical fact. Whether we've grown out of it now, that's a matter of discussion. But it isn't just, as you say, it's certainly not just ceremonial. It is a political entity, constitutional monarchy, i.e. you have a figurehead who's not powerful, not political, and then you have an elected parliament guiding them and how to rule the country. And I think that's a system that's worked, and most people want it to go on working.
Will?
Where I say indifference, this is what I mean. On the 19th of September 2022, when the State Hearse took what remained of Queen Elizabeth II and her crown into the grounds of Windsor Castle towards St George's Chapel and towards the cheerful English heaven that she believed in, I was there and I was with the crowds. And I've been with the crowds for the 10 days previously, following the mourning process for our monarch. And we all talked about the queue, and 250,000 people queued up. But I was in those crowds for 10 days.
They're not going to queue up.
They did not know how to, let me finish. They did not know how to behave. And when I went home each night, I would look at photos of Queen Victoria's funeral and the way in which the British behaved when she died. We do not have the link with a constitutional monarchy. We do not have the religious belief.
What was the difference in behaviour, Will, can I ask?
Well, people mourned, whereas where I was on the Long Walk in Windsor, I was with a group of Brazilian tourists who thought this was a good time to light a spliff as the crown went to...
Well,
so there's a disconnect.
I don't want to come the Victorian historian, but Queen Victoria was openly booed on the streets of London, more or less whenever she appeared, certainly when she went to the East End. She was not a popular figure. Queen Elizabeth II was, funnily enough, though she was a shy, withdrawn character, nobody knows much about her, she was an adored figure. And, I mean, you mentioned the mood of people having a bit of a smoke or having some weed in the queue. They were queuing up, and certainly the people who were queuing up to pay their respects to the body in Westminster. I don't think you're right to say that there was no air of mourning. She was such a strange and shy figure that I don't think you can feel mourning for somebody you don't feel you know. But there was an enormous feeling of respect, not just for her, but for the institution. And it's that feeling of respect. Whether or not you share it, that's a totally different matter, and whether or not you're smoking a bit of weed as you have these thoughts. It's totally. What is troubling about Prince Andrew is that he was smearing that feeling of respect and honour, which we have not just for the people but for the institution.
Yeah. Well, does this feel different? I suppose the Andrew scandal, the fact that he is being stripped of his prince title now today. Why is this a more defining moment for the royal family than previous conflicts or difficulties with public opinion or scandals?
I'm not going to be able to give you more history than Mr. Wilson.
Sure.
No, I'm not trying to be clever. Sorry.
No. But you are, and I love your work. But I would say, in recent history, the first photos of Andrew with Epstein appeared in the British press in March 2011. In April 2014, he was rewarded for this. He was given pitch at the palace, and that continued for some years. In November 2019, he appeared on Newsnight, and he lied. And then in February 2022. He paid off Virginia Giuffre. Now, at any moment in that sequence, what happened yesterday probably ought to have happened, okay? And instead, he was protected. Now, I know he denies the allegations against him, but I was astonished to read in the national press on the weekend briefings from the palace comparing the late Queen Elizabeth II to an ostrich who had her head in the sand. This was this figure that we were supposed to respect and revere. And the palace itself is now comparing her to one of the silliest looking animals on earth. I think in my lifetime, that's quite different. And I think they're undermining themselves in ways they don't understand. And I think it is dangerous for them.
Just a couple of thoughts to put to you.
Well, I don't think it was King Charles who was comparing his mother to an ostrich, but we can understand what they mean by that, and also the fact that it clearly was a terrible misjudgment. She wasn't a perfect human being. I'm saying she was a much respected human being.
I think at the heart of this, actually, is one of Will's questions from your article, Will, in the New Statesman, and I'm going to put this to you, Andrew, which is what exactly is being protected at this stage? And I wonder if there is historic comparisons to be made here, are historic comparisons to be made here, with when the royal family has been in turmoil, and the same question could be asked: what is it that's being protected?
Well, I think, I don't want to repeat myself, but the main thing they're worried about is us, the great British public, Will and me and everybody listening, say, where's all this money coming from? And basically it comes from us. Yeah. And therefore they've got to change this business of the two big duchies, which are their main source of income, which they don't acknowledge is public money. And I think that's the thing that they are most worried about. Obviously they're frightened of any kind of intrusion into their private life. I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing, and particularly nowadays when, I mean, look at what has happened in Prince Andrew's life. What he's done is awful, but at the same time he is a human being. He's now retreating, and how will he ever be able to appear in public again without somebody wanting to attack him? I mean, his position, I'm not saying it's tragic, but it's appallingly sad.
Yeah. He does deny all wrongdoing.
I know he does, but you see, when he denies it, but then his own brother says that he's stripping him of his titles. Yes. And then at the end, he says, although he denies all this, we, and it suddenly becomes him and Camilla, their majesties, can deeply and profoundly sympathise, or words to that effect, with all the victims. Well, I mean, that is in effect saying they don't believe him and that they're with Will and the vast majority of people who had heard the Emily Maitlis interview, that they don't believe the testimony. Well, they can't believe it because it's been proved to be untrue. Yeah.
And Will, just a final one for you on that question, what is being protected at this stage? And I suppose the follow-up, as far as you're concerned, is it abolition or bust, or would you take a Prince William reformed royal family, perhaps?
I think that they should sort of self-liquidate and it should be thrown to the public, and we should decide, and it could be a moment of national restoration and renewal, because at the moment it's a time of national grief, I think. We should expect our head of state and their family to represent us, to meet our unspoken needs and desires, and they're not doing that. And the thing that really worries me, and I put this in the piece, is that William doesn't even believe in God. How can he have a coronation in Westminster Abbey if he doesn't believe in God? The other thing that comes out about William, if you read recent royal biographies and books closely, is that he struggles to read properly. He doesn't like receiving written briefings. He likes oral ones. He can't name a favourite author, but he does have an interest in Batman-related superhero movies. Now, the last functionally illiterate monarch was William II in 1110. So this is a kind of once in a millennia.
Well, we're going back to it. We're going back a good old tradition. In other words, I mean, I think Will, you've got a very high view of the monarchy, and that's one of the reasons you want to replace it with something. Whereas I have a low view of the monarchy. I think it's a good functioning system. I think most of the people who've occupied the role have been pretty hopeless in one way or another, and quite honestly, whether Prince William can read or whether he believes in God is in a sense secondary.
We expect children to read, don't we?
No, but you don't expect all the children to be. You only expect one child at a time to become a constitutional monarch. It's a very modest. It's a very modest role. That's why the Queen, who is in a way a rather boring person, did it so well.
Okay, thank you both so much for your considerations this morning. That is what Times Radio is for, and we're very grateful to have your brain power on our programme this morning.
I don't. Not mine.
No, Will, you have huge brain power. Mega brain.
And look at this, a civil conversation to boot. Ian Wilson and Will Lloyd, thank you both very much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Will. Will is Deputy Editor at the New Statesman, and of course, Ian Wilson, a historian who we love having on Times Radio.